and doing it more. Like we have an eagerness to find it more,
Yeah.
continuous learning.
Continuous learning process. Yes.
Sir, I believe that whatever research has been done till now, majority of them has been contextualized with a Western world or a Western market. It's a very high time for us to look at the different perspective and incorporate the the Indian aspects into it, because it will generate altogether a different results. The market here is a very different.
Yeah.
The characteristics of the people or a stakeholder in a market, rather than just trying to understand the concept from the Western perspective.
Yes. Yes. And I also see participant writing sharing the knowledge. Well, I would say there are two reasons broadly. One is, I think, the compulsion in the sense that all of us have chosen a career in academics, and all of need to do research for getting the job or staying in the job, or for career progression. So that's, I think, the primary reason and motive why all of us do research, right? So that's something that we can't escape. But I think in the process that gives us the beginning, the initial reason why do we start doing research. But then once we do that, we also probably, some of us, not everyone, so some of us start liking it. Some of us find fun in doing research. Some of us probably find it meaningful to do research. We are less worried about the world, that my knowledge is going to make the world a better place, or save the humanity, or I do not as much care about sharing my knowledge so that it is helpful, useful to others. Probably these are beyond most of the mortal beings, most of us. I mean, there are of course few greats who goes into the history of the science for their contribution, but most of us mortal beings do it because we like to do it. It's almost like an artist creating a painting, not to please someone else, but to please himself or herself. Or we writing a poetry, again, not to please someone else, but to please ourselves. And the reward is intrinsic. So when I say intrinsic reward, it's after a while that we have met our own career expectations, we continue to do research afterwards as well, because it's intrinsically rewarding. It gives meaning to our life. It defines who we are. So I think the best motive, or the probably the one of the top motives of the people who are highly productive researcher is that they feel intrinsically motivated by doing research. They derive satisfaction, happiness, reading something which is very interesting, or writing something which they see as their creation. It's almost like a painter looks at the painting in the progress and feels proud about it. Or a sculpture, or a sculpture artist who probably sees at the sculpture that he or she is creating and then feels proud about it. Doesn't matter whether the world feels or shares the feeling or not. So that is, I think, a necessary requirement to be a productive researcher, that you start falling in love with your own research. At a risky enterprise, there are no guaranteed payoffs of research. And hence, unless the process of doing research is self-rewarding, it is intrinsically rewarding, we may not have the power, ability to persevere. So doing one research takes so much of time, takes so much of effort, and so long a gestation period, that when we start a research and when we see it published on paper, it is almost 2 years time, and several rejections in between, several criticisms in between. Now, unless you are in love with the research or the process and not the outcome, it's very difficult for you to remain motivated and carry yourself through this entire period and see the publication. So it requires perseverance as well. So I wish you that intrinsic reward, intrinsic motivation that comes somewhere. It's very difficult to artificially develop it. Some of us are never meant to be productive researchers. We do research. That doesn't mean we are bad or poor academics, but we are academics of different type. There is a role of academics, which is knowledge dissemination rather than knowledge creation. So some of us are very good at knowledge dissemination, which is teaching and training activities. Some of us are very good at knowledge creation, and a very few of us are good at both knowledge dissemination as well as knowledge creation through their personal efforts or greater amount of time that is spent at work, and create a little bit of imbalance in their work and professional life as well. So with this kind of a disclaimer, to kind of de-glamorize the research and publication, as I have told you, please don't hesitate to ask questions and make it interactive as possible. Okay, so I have two parts of this talk. One is writing research paper. How do we write good research paper, or what is expected? I will elaborate or spend more time on this aspect, writing research paper. I'll take you through step by step, every section, what is expected in every section, and also will demonstrate how to do these things in each of the section through my published research work. Okay, so that you are able to kind of understand the meaning of bigger sentences that I say in the beginning. All right, who do we write for? That's important. Whenever we are writing something, or what we call research writing, there are types of research writings, right? We write for journals, scholarly journals, which have broader focus. Okay, for example, management science or journal of management is a broad scholarly journal in management discipline, which publishes all kind of works in management without any disciplinary bias or focus. So they are focused on the larger issue. They are most scholarly journals. So I can, as a marketing expert, probably would also like and prefer to publish my paper if it's worth its salt. It's very difficult in journal of management or in marketing, in management science, rather than in marketing science, which is a specialized scholarly journal. So below that, we have specialized scholarly journals such as marketing science or journal of finance, right? So these are all highly scholarly journals which are disciplinary focused. Below that, we find books and books chapters. Okay, a lot of us also write book chapters, which are also scholarly. Then there are applied journals. So there are certain journals which aims at the managerial application of knowledge. So they don't publish basic or theoretical research. They largely focus on what does this research mean for my bank. So if I translate the importance of net promoter score in banking context, and I write a paper which helps bankers or managers in banks use net promoter score and increase customer satisfaction for them, that becomes applied journal. And there are several journals which are aimed at this application focus in management discipline. Below that, there are textbooks and business books. Now, this is some kind of a hierarchy of knowledge in which we would like to disseminate our findings. What is the difference is in terms of knowledge creation. So all the new knowledge largely gets published, or all the theoretical generalizable knowledge goes into the scholarly journals. Largely applied knowledge goes into the books and textbooks. There is one more difference, that the longevity of scholarly journals or scholarly publication is much higher, much longer. Textbooks, business books, applied research soon becomes outdated. For example, today's net promoter score, very important for several organizations. It may become outdated or obsolete in maybe 3 years time for hence, may be replaced by another performance metrics or another metrics of customer satisfaction. So the longevity of this is relatively less. Next, I'm talking about certain type of research in this workshop. There are several types of research. Okay, research is not one type. There is empirical research, for example, and there is a theoretical research. Within empirical research as well, there is a positivist research and there is interpretivist research. right? There is theoretical research, there is meta-analytical research, and there are case study research. Now, if I very quickly introduce some of the meaning of this term, is that case study research focuses on a particular case and trying to develop a theory from that applied context and propose a theory where you don't test any hypothesis. There is no proof or scientific proof which is provided. All it does is provides an exploration, open-minded exploration. There is no theory testing there. There is no empirical testing of any sort there. Its objective is totally different. Okay, yet there are this case study research which are very valuable, which are important in development of a discipline or development of a theory in a particular discipline. There is a meta-analysis or meta-analytical research. What is the role of meta-analytical research? Is that it allows me to distill the research finding after, let's say, some 100 studies have taken place. So in a particular area, a large number of research have taken place and the evidences are contradictory. I am still not able to understand whether customer satisfaction enhances profit or not. In some contexts, the people say yes, some contexts people say no, and I don't know what I should infer ultimately. So in those contexts, we have meta-analytic study, which means study of studies or research of researches, which allows me to consolidate the findings or data published from large number of research in the past. I collate those data and then have my own findings to distill that what is the ultimate finding coming from the large number of studies. So it's a meta-analytic study, which is another type of research, requires different tools and techniques. Theoretical research, again, doesn't test, doesn't has any hypothesis, doesn't prove anything. This is more about argumentation. It's more about discussion, theory building. So you focus on defining constructs, defining interrelationship, putting up propositions and theoretical connections without having any burden of providing empirical proof of same. So this is theoretical research. And again, let me tell you that this is one of the most difficult type of research. Very few papers published even in the world's topmost journals are theory research. So maybe you find one a quarter kind of a paper that emerges, or 3-4 meaningful theory papers, which normally you find getting published, or new theory research getting published in a world's top journal. However, the citation, the longevity, the impact of this kind of research, theory research, is huge. It's extremely, extremely high. And the research that we know of or that we are aware of is called empirical research. Now, what is empirical research? That the research that has hypothesis, that collects data, that runs the analysis and gives the results. Okay, this is the kind of the stereotype of research that we have in mind, or the model of research that we all carry, or that's largely taught in management schools, is empirical research. Now, within empirical research, again, there are two types of research, interpretivist and positivist. Interpretivist research largely focuses on giving interpretation and meaning to social phenomenon, which is more, we call it qualitative research largely. Okay, so those qualitative kind of research and which has empirical content is known as interpretivist research. Whereas we all are going to discuss today in this workshop on only one type of research, which is positivist research. Okay, the research that we all understand and know, the structure that is that we are all familiar with, or the kind of research paper that we all do read. So we already have, I believe, I presuppose, certain amount of familiarity with the kind of research that I'm talking about. You have read several research papers, which has a standard introduction section, then theory building and hypothesis, and then data collection, methodology section, data analysis, conclusion, discussion, and limitations. Okay, so this type of research that we are going to talk about in this workshop. Okay, so let us begin. That what is the beginning of our research? The beginning of any research endeavor is idea generation, right? What do we research about? What do we think about? So where does the research idea come from? Where do we get the ideas for research?
Maybe our surroundings or the problems that we are facing
Yes,
that might give us an idea of solving those problems, and that's how we get clicked, okay, why we can do research on this area, because it is
amazing,
creating problem and we need to find a solution for this.
amazing. That's I think most appropriate time. I mean, I normally expect the first responses from literature gap. Okay, so this is the most known way to find a research idea, that I do a literature review and then I see there is some kind of a gap in the literature, though X and Y are related, but nobody has looked at relationship between Y and Z. So I would focus on Y and Z because there's a gap in the literature. So this is the most known way of doing research. But let me tell you that this is probably not the most impactful way of finding a research idea, meaningful research idea. Not to discredit it, not to say that it is any less important. It is very, very important. It's, I think, the most used way of finding research idea. But what I want to emphasize is that there are other important and more meaningful ways in which we can identify research ideas or research topics that are ignored. That is, as ma'am said, by observing the problems that surrounds the society, that gets reported in newspaper, or that we are able to identify in our surrounding. So if we understand, for example, that this Swachh Bharat mission was already kind of getting implemented, and then we understand that it is not getting adopted easily. So toilets are getting constructed, but then they are not getting adopted. Now this gets widely reported in media. Now this is a practical problem in our surrounding, and one of the ways in which to find interesting research topics is that we pick these problems early on before they catches the attention of masses. And that's important because the way you think about this problem, there are probably billions others who are simultaneously thinking about these opportunities, this problems, and they are first to pick up. Now, one of the problem in research or in high impact research is who is first. Okay, and we have seen in the history of science that Graham Bell, the person who's credited with invention of telephone, was not the first one to invent the telephone. He was first one to get it patented, get it registered, right? So someone who's first to publish gets the entire credit, and the remaining one who are working on similar topic do not get their paper accepted or paper published in good journals. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Now, a second part, as someone says, yes, Gaurang says by reading and observations. Yes, reading, observation, newspaper, observing the problems in this society. Sometimes there are certain phenomena which are not even reported in newspapers. But if you are observant, if you see certain new things coming up, those new emerging issues provide you great opportunity for doing research. For example, we now see, and it is still outdated, but I'm saying that, let's say 5 years back, if people, some of us had observed that there are a new class of people which are emerging, and they are called social media influencers. These people post anything. They could be putting up their cookery thing, they're putting up their news snippets, or they could be just giving their opinions about anything 5 years back. And if we are observant, we notice this phenomenon that yes, there are a large number of people which have now opened up their channels, YouTube channels, social media channels, and are putting up some content, and there are people who are watching and following it. Now, if you identify this phenomenon early on, 5 years before, and then do some bit of research about who they are, what are their motives, what makes them tick with the audience, what makes them not tick with the audience, and do some bit of research, you again have first more advantage and are able to find an important research topic. So it's not always a problem. Okay, it's not always a problem that goes into the journal or that should be the focus of a researcher. Sometimes there is no problem. There is just a phenomenon which is happening and your objective is to study the phenomenon, explain its antecedent consequences or nuances. That in itself, I think, is a sufficient ground for providing you very interesting and novel research ideas. Okay, so choosing right research ideas always are important for publication in good quality journals. Now, I also find one common problem is that most of the new researcher basically they think about doing research which is already done in a new or different context. So when I get thesis for evaluation or I get some research for review, so they say that this theory of something is tested in, let's say, in US, in Europe, I want to replicate it in India. Or it's done in India, but I want to do it in Orissa, or I want to do it in Eastern India or in South India, in West India or in North India. Now, this doesn't give you a sufficient justification for doing research or for replicating a research. This kind of research is not going to get accepted in any good quality outlet. So when we argue that the research of West is not relevant or not directly applicable in Indian context, and hence I am replicating the same research, that's not a sufficiently good reason. What you have to provide is that what aspect of theory in the research is less applicable in Indian context and why? What are the new constructs or phenomena or variables which exist in India that makes the theory much more complicated in Indian context than it is in the Western context? You have to specify those aspects. You have to operationalize those constructs and you have to embed it in your research to demonstrate that the presence of this variables makes this theory differentially applicable in Indian context. Unless you demonstrate and prove this, there is no sufficient reason for you to say that it's not done in India and hence you're doing it. And worse so, saying that it is not done in Gujarat and hence I'm doing it. Okay, it's done in Orissa and I'm doing it in Gujarat. So we have to understand that one of the important requirement of research is that people believe, or the disciplined researchers believe, that this is generalizable. This is one of the biggest requirement of research, that all your findings are generalizable. Of course, not universally, but in a broader context, they are generalizable. So you have to provide those boundaries that define the generalizability of particular research. And hence, replicating a research is not considered acceptable. Because research is generalizable, it's already published. So we know that if it's relevant in Orissa, I know that it's relevant in Gujarat, unless you put certain arguments, theoretical arguments, that shows how Gujarat and Orissa are different, and those differences interact with the given theory and alters the processes, mechanisms, and the outcomes. And hence it demands a new investigation in a different lens, in a different manner. Okay, unless this is argued, unless this is established, it is very difficult for us to really make a claim for replication of the existing research. Okay, so that is something we would keep in mind. Not to say that it's a bad research. I think it's a great way to begin learning, or a great way to begin doing research. I advise my doctoral students to think that how you would like to replicate certain research in Indian context. Okay, so that's a great way, but we have to quickly use it as our kind of a springboard, and then move on to doing more meaningful research that enhances the knowledge rather than that replicates the knowledge. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So in order to again establish the relevance of the research, I would suggest that all of us, before we begin research, and why am I emphasizing on the beginning part more? The other parts, I will be very quick, introduction and literature review, how to do that, because it's not that difficult as probably beginning the research in the empirical positivist type of researches. I think the most important thing in positivist research is the beginning. In case study research, in theory building research, beginning is not important. Why? Because you have several opportunities. It is kind of interactive. It is recursive process where you do a research, you go wrong, then you come back and then you revise and you go wrong, you again. So it's almost like a spiral, those researches. Interpretivist, theory building, case study research are like spirals. So they keep growing. And hence you are neither wrong at one point nor right at the other point. But in empirical positivist research, it is almost like casting a die in the beginning. So you are creating a die, and if that die is wrong, your impressions that you capture afterwards are never going to be right. Okay? So जो हम ये बनाते हैं उसको replicate करने के लिए जो एक उसका framework, वो framework outline, that's wrong. Okay, we are going to reproduce images which are anyway incorrect or faulty. So empirical positive research requires great deal of work, considerations in the beginning, because there is no way you can come back if you realize midway that you have gone wrong. There is no point of return there. In other research, there is a point of return. So it's almost like you waste your effort. When you realize midway through that you've gone wrong, it's too late for you to recover. So hence I'm emphasizing that before you start, identify an important topic that's not replicated already. Identify issues that are relevant, that are going to be of interest to you, most importantly, and to others in the field. And second, ask yourself these honest questions. Okay. Is my research question interesting? Is my research going to make sufficient contribution to both practice as well as to theory, to academics? And then at the same time, I have to also think about my conceptual framework. Whether my conceptual framework that I'm going to use, and I will explain how to develop conceptual framework, okay? But whether my conceptual framework is well developed, or it is sketchy, it is rudimentary. Is my methodology flaw-free, or does it have any serious flaws in it? And again, what kind of flaws affect our methods, I will again discuss later in this workshop. And is my writing clear and flowing well? The answer to most of this question should be yes, and a strong yes. Okay. It also means, what I'm saying is that you have to think about these 5 questions, at least the first 4 questions ex ante, before you start the research. So which means you have to think about your research question first before you even start writing or collecting data. That comes much later. You also know what contribution your research is going to make, and you should be able to explain it to your 8th grade child. If you can explain it to 8th grade child, that means you know it well, and that child understands as well. Okay, what is it that you're trying, that you're doing? If that person, that child doesn't understand, probably you also do not have clarity. Okay. Conceptual framework is well developed. Okay, this is an argument. This is why question. Why X should be related to Y. Okay, this is a conceptual framework. So you must know, you must have it ex ante, beforehand, before you even think of beginning collecting data. And you have to think about methods. That means who is going to provide you data, who's going to be respondent, what kind of data you'll be collecting, from where you are going to collect the data, how are you going to analyze them, how do you ensure that this data are valid, they are not fictitious or not perception data, they are not faulty perception, they are not random assignment of numbers by your respondent. So how do you ensure all this methodological concerns in data collection ex ante? Only then it makes sense that you go ahead. So this is almost like a blueprint of research being ready. So the analogy is that when you are constructing a house, you first get the blueprint prepared from an architect, and remaining task is only a labor, right? So you don't need an architect afterwards. Then all that's required is a supervisor and a labor who keeps on putting the bricks on bricks to create a wall according to the specification. So much of the work afterwards is labor, but beforehand, creating the research blueprint is, I think, the most difficult task of doing a research. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah. Yes.
before we move ahead, I have certain queries here.
Yes, please.
Rather than queries, these are actually, you can say, revelations or experience that I will share.
Yes. Please.
As beginners, we know that these are the questions that we should answer ourselves. What happens that because we are beginners, we overestimate our answers. So is the research question interesting? Yes, I do find it interesting. When it is submitted, the reviewer, the editor does not find it interesting.
Yes, yes.
It is what happens generally when we are beginners. So same thing happens with like making the contribution, methodologies free of flow or not. We feel it is there, but then it does not happen so. So how would you guide it?
Yes, no, that's a very important question, and all of us go through this dilemma in the beginning, and then we realize the simple answer is that researchers should not work in isolation. The image of a researcher or a scientist of 19th century is that a person who with frayed hair, wearing white coat, is closed in the laboratory and doing or playing with some chemicals and other things, right? So this is the stereotype. So that person is a loner. That person is cut off from the rest of the world and merely spends time thinking and doing something, experimenting. Now, this is not the true or correct stereotype of a management researcher or a social science researcher. A researcher in social science is required to continuously interact, discuss the ideas with colleagues, with collaborators, and with people at large. So I would advise, and why don't we do that? I mean, two reasons. One, that probably we are slightly shy or less outgoing or less interactive as such. I think that can be pardoned. But what is the bigger mistake that all of us make is that my research idea will be stolen. That fear that my idea will get stolen and somebody else will win Nobel Prize on that keeps us from sharing our research idea, discussing it with my peers, colleagues, and benefiting from that. Please believe me, no one is interested in stealing your research idea. If at all, they would steal your research paper. Okay, even if 10 ideas are given to anyone else, it takes huge amount of effort to write a proper research paper out of it. So I would suggest that don't share your final draft of your research paper if you're worried about that. Again, in today's world, it is very difficult. Earlier, in the pre-internet era, it was relatively easy for someone to steal and go scot-free by publishing the research paper in their name, because there is no way you can establish that this draft belonged to you. Now you already have those those e-copies, Word files and versions created on your computer and your network. If you put it on Google Drive, it will have those markers, which means if someone steals and publishes it, you can easily claim that it belongs to you and you can provide proof. That person cannot provide the proof because that person will only have copy after person has stolen it. So pre-copy only exists. So my point is that we often fear that my idea will be stolen, my paper will be stolen, and we don't interact. This is enemy number one. I would suggest that always anywhere you have possibility of having a tea time talk or a corridor talk, it's better to discuss ideas, better to discuss research topics or phenomena and what can be done about it. In the institute, or more importantly, I would suggest with outside, have network, build collaborators and give them ideas to challenge it. Don't feel attacked if your idea is criticized. Now we have to learn, all of us. For example, in the beginning, when I was doing my FPM, I realized initial years, I used to feel attacked if my professors or somebody else in a conference, whenever I'm making a presentation of my research work, would criticize it. I would feel that I am being put down by this individual. Whereas it takes a little bit of maturity and time to realize that, no, it's not me. It's my idea is different. My work is different from I am. So no one is saying I am bad. All they're saying is that the work that is created has this flaws. And the moment you start accepting this differentiation between you and your work, you become more open. In fact, you also learn to criticize it because you don't have to own it up, right? You are not the final owner that you have to become almost a kind of a patron or a parent of your work. You don't have to be or father, mother that you feel insulted if your kid is getting criticized for something. Okay, it's your work. In fact, you should be its biggest critic. You don't have to prove or defend it. If it's wrong, you criticize it. So once you start this collaboration, start a network or create a network, and there are pre-existing networks as well where you can share your ideas, discuss, and then derive insights and criticism. You are able to cut out several potential mistakes ex ante, because what happens otherwise, that you may spend huge amount of labor, huge amount of hours in doing something that is going to get criticized and rejected for certain reasons that you could have yourself identified in the beginning. That would have saved you time. Okay, so always I would encourage that please share more and discuss more, present more. Again, one of the ways I think all the institutes should have some weekly seminar series or monthly seminar series where you discuss not only completed papers but initial ideas as well. So it's only difficult in the beginning, but once it picks up some steam, everyone enjoys presenting ideas. It need not be papers, but just ideas.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I see a lot of potential in a field of a neuromarketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very expensive to do research, very
Yes.
difficult to get the people on the board. Yet I want to explore it. Besides getting the fund for the research, what's a way out to explore this particular specific phenomenon? Because it's a very interesting domain from the consumer psychology point of view, but
Yes.
you must be knowing it's extremely expensive one. So how to
Absolutely.
initiate a research in
Yeah.
this kind of domain?
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, neuromarketing holds a lot of potential. I mean, much part of consumer behavior related part of marketing is evolving in this domain and direction. And yes, the research in this field requires a lot of sophisticated machines such as fMRI and eye tracker and certain visual, what do you call those, AI headsets, right? VR headsets and several other things. Now, one of the ways to find this instruments is through collaboration. There are certain centers in India. If your institute doesn't have it, and most of the institutes don't have it in India, for example, but there are a few institutes. For example, there is this Amrita Business School in Coimbatore, Amrita Anandmay School of Business in Coimbatore. They have this entire lab for neuromarketing. Okay, they have built entire lab for neuromarketing. Now, this Amrita Business School in Coimbatore becomes your prime target for collaboration. Maybe a visit, maybe finding people working there, writing to them, discussing ideas, building collaboration, and then getting access to or having maybe collaborative research with them. Second part, to develop and why they would be interested, for example. Now, okay, that's a right reciprocal question, that why you are interested, it's known, but why they should be interested in you. So for that, you also have to have something to offer to them. And what is it that you can offer? So you have to offer probably your expertise of theory or your expertise of method, or both. So it is possible that they have machines, but probably they do not know the entire method. So how to run fMRIs, how to run eye tracking, or how to analyze data collected from fMRI or MRI or VR headsets, that you must be good at. So for that, you may have to do reading, you may have to acquire capabilities of analyzing those data generated from this instrument. That's your value proposition for them. Okay, so that's how probably collaborations are developed and becomes fruitful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, then let's get going. Crafting a paper. So what are the parts of a research paper? I think the first part is the title, right? So I often find titles are incorrect, or what are the common mistakes in the title part. Okay, so I'll discuss with that. Before that, I think yes. Yeah. So I'll just simply introduction, theoretical framework, methods, and discussion. I'll explain all of this. But let's wait for a while before we go that. Yes, let's start with the title and abstract. So title, normally I find are too lengthy. So you don't have to put a couple of sentences in a title. Ideally, it should not be longer than 10 words. Okay, any title, not longer than 10 words, but those 10 words should be sufficient in identifying the main issue of the paper. We don't have to give name of the method as well. Sometimes I find that there's title of the paper and then they write that Bayesian analytic approach. Okay, now it doesn't make our structural equation modeling approach. It doesn't make it's okay. I mean, any method can be used. So you don't have to do that. It should focus on the main issue that's being addressed. Okay, it should be unambiguous, specific, complete, and don't use abbreviations. And it should be, as more importantly, interesting. It should attract the attention of the reader. The moment someone reads the title, someone should feel encouraged, motivated to read the entire paper. So it should invite the attention of the reader. Focus on that. 2, abstract. Abstract should be informative, provide overview of the entire research. Abstract is also anti-climax. You don't build suspense through abstract. Okay, you reveal the entire suspense in abstract. So it's almost anti-climax. So if you have done research, don't say what you found in the for the paper. So abstract provides a complete overview of the research in 80, in 200, in less than 200 words. Okay, so focus on writing clear abstract, because again, many a time your journal editor rejects the paper merely by reading title and abstract. If your abstract is poorly written, there is no way it's going to get through the editor's desk. If your paper is well written, but abstract is sketchy, is non-definite, so it's going to get rejected. Okay, so focus on abstract, which tells me as a reader that what should I expect in the entire paper. So it should be a very interesting trailer of the paper. Okay. Now, first part, writing introduction. What do we know? Where are we?
I
Yeah.
have a question, sir.
Yes, please tell me.
Sir, you have said like in abstract, we have to give the overview of the research. So
Yes.
what comes under the overview of the research? What point should we cover?
Okay, so abstract, it should provide a complete picture of the entire paper in a, let's say 250 words, in less than 250 words. So it covers your reason for doing research, that what is the major reason that you're doing research, why this research, justify the need for study in the first sentence. It should provide that what is the major conceptual framework or theoretical frameworks that you have used to study. 3, what are the methods, or very simple sentence on how you collected data and how you analyzed. what you found, and what are its theoretical and managerial implication, which is contribution of the study. So in short, it should have a couple of sentences on each one of these, such that reading it, I get a complete idea of what you have done in the rest of the paper. So rest of the paper is merely an elaboration of your abstract. But please mind well,
Sir,
you write
we should write.
abstract at the end. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, one last thing, sir. In the
Uh-huh.
end, we have to write the suggestion also, like we are like anything else,
I
or
think
it
this,
should be the end with the managerial implication only.
the implications, theoretical and managerial implications of the study is sufficient. I think it's a nice place where you want to end the abstract, because abstracts normally are of two types. Okay, two types abstract. There are structured abstract and there are unstructured abstract. Normally, unstructured abstracts have a limitation of 200 to 300 maximum. No journal allows more than bigger abstract than 300 words. Most of the journals demand 200 words abstract. So in 200 words, you have very limited space and time available in which you describe what this research is about. So it's not that you want to reveal all the limitations and all the suggestions that I want to provide to someone else, that those things are not important. It's a small snapshot of what is the need for this study, what was your approach to doing this study, and what you found. Now, in structured abstract, you are given slightly bigger space. So certain journal, particularly Emerald journals, they demand structured abstract. So in structured abstract, you are already given structure that you have to first write about the purpose of the research. Then you have to write about the theory that you have used. Then you write about method that you have used. Then you write about findings of the study, and then you write about the contribution and limitations of the study, in which case you write in a structured way for all these sections, which is normally a page long, 1 page long kind of a structured abstract. So do not overdo, just provide basic minimum information to someone so as person understands that what he or she can expect, the reader can expect while reading the entire paper. Okay, Nitish, thanks for asking, and please let me know if you have any other questions. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, one last thing, sir. Like we are deciding the keywords.
Yes, yes. Okay, nice. Good question. So yes, keywords are important now because it helps journals organize the paper or organize the research work, large amount of research work into certain components. It also enables search and identification of research online means. So keywords tells the journal that this research can be categorized under which heads. Okay, so choose those 5 important keywords that describes your core of research. Okay, core of research. So if your research is about women empowerment, then you know that this is an important keyword, women empowerment. Okay, probably it is in the context of Panchayati Raj system, then you also use PRIs or Panchayati Raj institution as another keyword. So reading keyword, I should be able to put your research in one of the baskets that allows somebody else, third party, to later on find out the research or create a bundle of research papers that are there in that particular basket. So it increases the chances of citation, chances of reading and identification of research by other researchers. Okay, don't use unknown or don't use abbreviations for your research. You may have used them, but don't use it unless they are commonly accepted terminology in the discipline. Okay, so you have to be very careful. Use the normally accepted terms for your keywords. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you, sir.
Okay, let's move ahead then. Writing. Now, writing introduction is the trickiest part. Trickiest and I would say most important part of research writing. Why? Because most of the research paper that I get for review are weak, or they lose my interest. Or when I say my, I'm talking about other reviewers as well, other reviewers' interest, or they get rejected the moment someone reads the introduction. I can safely say that almost 50 to 60% of the research papers are rejected at the level of introduction itself. The moment reviewer reads introduction, what is expected in introduction? Person realizes that this paper is not worth the salt. What is expected? So in introduction, we have to show that what do we know and where we are currently. But what is the problem here? What is the debate? What is my contribution? In whatever we know, what is missing? Okay, so we have to identify that what is required actually, what is needed. And for that, I present a plan that though we know ABC things, however, the debate doesn't tell that whether A is first or B is first or C is first, and knowing the order of ABC things is very, very important. And in this research, I plan to sort this out, that I want to identify whether A comes first or B comes later or C comes later through using this method. And I find at the end of my research, again, anticlimax, and I find that A should precede B and B should precede C in this debate. This is my contribution, and I now explain how I went about doing this research. Now, this introduction is not written in a cogent manner, is not persuasive for me to read the research. That means it must establish that why do we need this research? What is the value of this research? What contribution this research makes? So you basically justify your entire need for research. Why am I doing this research in the introduction section itself? If you fail to do that, you don't save it for later. You don't save it for end. Your biggest meat and biggest cream is given in the introduction section. So I'll also explain, for example, now let us try and see through an example of research. So when I say, for example, in the starting, that decentralization is considered by many a very important idea in the field of public governance. And there are a large number of studies which have accepted the importance and relevance of decentralized governance in rural institutions. This is known. So I also cite studies that who said what good things about it. Now, problematize. There is a lot of experience about decentralization among social scientists, policymakers, social movements, and NGOs who all support decentralization. Okay, again, I provide citation references. Political factions, political parties are also supportive of the idea of decentralization across the party. So there is a bipartisan support, bipartisan political support for this idea of decentralization. However, now I enter the second part. However, there are dissident voices as well. What are the dissident voices? That they say that there is a power asymmetry which is reproduced by decentralization at a local level, which means that when the power is devolved in the village to locals, the power doesn't get similarly or equitably distributed across different communities. Certain communities are able to get more power or capture power at the local level at the expense of other communities. And these communities are largely disadvantaged and poor communities. And hence, decentralization is not one type of good thing that which has no negative sides. So, empowerment of poor and marginalized people is not necessarily enhanced. I'm problematizing something which is accepted. I'm problematizing it. And hence, what do we need to know now? Hence, we need to understand the impact of or differential impact of decentralization on marginalized and disadvantaged communities in the village. What it does to them. We have done it at a macro level. We have done it at a societal level, that decentralization is good for village. But within the village, we have not studied that whether it is good for certain section of the village or for all the section of village. And hence, my study is seeking to understand the impact of decentralization on low income group. My study context is this particular area, tribal area. My study context is this area particularly. Now I have completed my introduction section. So do you see how does it establish the need for this study? Why am I doing this study? It tells you in the beginning that what is known. It identifies what is not known. And it also identifies what is the problem when we don't know this. And what my study does, contributes. So if I have written this introduction like this, almost I can say that you can focus at least on 1,000 words of introduction in a research paper, okay? So you should use at least 1,000 words to set up the importance of your introduction section. Now, here if you have failed to convince the reader that whether this is interesting, then you have lost it. Okay. Now, second part. I hope everyone's clear here. Any doubts?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right. Now, let us then go to the next part. Introduction is over. Next part is theoretical foundation of the study. Now, I have shown what is the importance of the study, right? But then how do I theoretically explain this? So I need second part. In the second part, largely it's variously named. Some people call it theoretical foundation and hypothesis development. Some people call it conceptual framework and hypothesis development, or literature review section, something like that. Okay. So the second part of the paper, after setting up the importance of the study in the introduction, is you need to identify theoretical foundation of your research. So you are studying the phenomenon of decentralization or impact of decentralized governance on poor, but you need a theoretical lens for studying it. You are not a news journalist. What is the difference between a researcher and a journalist? Both are interested in this topic. Both would go to the field, would collect data, would do interview and do something, and then would tell that हमारी चैनल ने यहाँ पे बताया कि डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन का फायदा गरीबों तक नहीं पहुंच रहा है. They say all things. The dominant caste of the village has captured all the power which is devolved by the state or by the center. Now this is the finding. This is a newspaper reporting or a journalistic reporting, a journalistic writing. This is not an academic writing. So journalists report what they see. Researchers are interested in explaining the phenomenon, that why something is happening, why dominant caste captures the local power, and why poor are not able to enjoy the benefits of decentralization. So they are more interested in answering the why. Now, whenever you want to answer the why, you have to take the theoretical approach. Okay, so you take theoretical approach to explain this phenomenon. Something happening, something not happening must be explained through one of the available theories, or you need to create your own theory, which is a very daunting task. But then there are theories. And what are theories? Theories are general statement of interrelationship between certain constructs that seek to explain and predict phenomena. So you have to identify, okay, this problem of decentralization, which theory can explain differential impact or differential benefit of decentralization amongst poor and rich communities. So I have to identify one of this theory. And through this theory, I am able to explain this phenomenon very easily, because theory already tells me what things should happen in real world. So theory tells me. When I apply this theory to the context, I derive my hypothesis, okay, which are implications which are consistent, which are naturally derived from the theory. So hypotheses are not standalone observations. Hypothesis must be derived from the theory. One of the reasons why research is rejected or your papers are rejected is that reviewers find that hypothesis and theory are not in sync. So hypotheses are not logically derived from theoretical discussion, or sometimes there is no theory at all. One of the biggest problem amongst the young researcher and their papers is that they start reviewing the literature. They think that I have identified the phenomenon, now I need to do literature review. Literature review doesn't help.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I have a question for introduction part.
Yes.
In introduction, how to draft cited statements with
Uh-huh.
present views or combination of both?
So yes, so when you are saying that what is known, for example, when I went here, yes, what do we know? Okay, so when I'm saying that decentralization is considered a very good idea in the literature, several studies have identified their advantages. So I'm giving now what are the advantages A, B, C, D, and for each one of them I am providing references that which study has provided this advantage, which study has provided advantage B, which study has provided advantage C. Okay, and then I am saying that it experiences support among social sciences, policymakers, social movement, and NGO workers. Again, I need to, because I'm saying this, who proves it? So somebody else must have provided a proof. So I need to identify which research has already provided the proof of this idea, this statement. So I have to cite them. Okay, when I'm saying that it has received bipartisan support, it's not my perception, it's not my impression, it's not my opinion that counts. I have to provide a research proof that has sought to study this, that has already proved that decentralization as an idea has received bipartisan support.
Okay, sir. And how we have to write the statement, in the words of author or in the words of our own?
No, everything has to be in your own word. Even if you have read a study and you want to, let's say that this authors have said this, in particularly in this literature review. Okay, so let me, yes, literature review here.
Okay.
What I find is that many times people identify 10 research papers and then they go on summarizing each one of them. So this person, Sharma et al. Have said this. Then Patel et al. Have said this. Modi et al. Have said this. So this is not literature review. This is not even literature summary. First of all, literature review's purpose is not to say that I have read 10 research or 100 research paper and each one of them says what. That is not the purpose of the literature review. Literature review, again, should not, you should never pick up the words, exact words and sentences of the authors. You can read, you can understand the meaning of their work, and you have to write in your own words.
Okay.
Yes, sometimes when we are trying to emphasize a particular point, we think that these authors have put up a very cogent expression of this particular thing, in which case I can pick up a sentence or two less than 144 words put together from that paper and put it in double quotes and give the reference, page number, as well as the citation reference.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, ma'am. And this is very important. You have asked very important question. Thanks for that, because in absence of that, it leads to charge of plagiarism. And that is very dangerous for an academic. And now we have several softwares available which are able to instantaneously identify the source, identify the place, exact web page. It can tell you the web page from where this particular thing is copied, howsoever deeply embedded it might be, or in some research paper as well. So all the databases on the internet as well as research paper or the books whose print copy that we are aware of, their databases are already integrated and available in soft copy. For this, particular softwares who are able to identify. So
Sir,
we have, yeah,
Sir, I have one more question for plagiarism.
yes, please.
When it's a matter of plagiarism, when we are doing plagiarism and then we are sending that research paper to the conference or journal, at
Mhm.
that time plagiarism will increase. Our own work will state as a plagiarism. So how to avoid this?
Yes. So at least when you are submitting a paper to a journal, you have to ensure that whether you are happy with your paper being published by the journal, by the conference as conference proceeding. If yes, you can send your full paper there. If no, if your objective is to just to go interact and make a presentation, you should always make sure that you are not sending your, or you are not signing away the copyrights of your conference paper with the journal. You categorically ask them not to publish it in the conference proceedings. You have that option and you can exercise that option, or you can then only send extended abstract to the conference, so that you retain the right of publishing it in a journal. And later on, when similarity emerges, at least you can defend yourself that this is my paper, it's a work in progress, it's not a publication, so you've not signed an agreement giving away the copyright to freely distribute your research paper to others, and hence you can publish it in journal as well. Otherwise, that also gets reported. Some journals, some editors are lenient about it. Okay, but certain other journals or high ranking journals are not so lenient about it. So we have to be careful whenever we are sending full paper to conferences.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
So that's very important question you've asked. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, I am referring to one paper, for example, of author A,
Mhm.
and he has quoted the work of author B.
Mhm.
And if I want to use the work of author B,
Mhm.
then how can I, should I quote A straight away or B straight away?
You have to give credit to B. You have to always give credit, or the citation should belong to the original producer of knowledge. So
Okay.
if I have, for example, in my paper cited someone's work and you only read my paper, it's not my contribution. It's not I have said.
Okay.
I have used someone else's work. So you should also give credit to that person. What is the meaning of citation, for example? Let us understand that. References are very important in science. Why? Because in science, you have to provide proof that whatever I am saying is already established proof, is a fact. Okay, so how do I establish that whatever I'm saying is true? For example, in the case of this, idea of decentralization has received bipartisan support. All political parties support idea of decentralization. Now, I may have read it somewhere in newspaper. That's not a proof. That could be impression, right? Now, I have to prove that, no, this is indeed a right thing. So somebody, I have to identify who has done research on this. And I cite that person's research work to provide proof that I am basing my research on someone else's research. And hence, you remember that famous sentence when the Nobel prize receiver said that I am standing on the shoulder of giants. Okay, so any researcher always is standing on shoulder of other researchers. That's how you look tall. You never produce entire new knowledge. Your knowledge, your own knowledge, is based on someone else's knowledge and effort. So that's how you're linked. You have to trust. So a paper has gone through a peer review process, is published in valid scientific journal. Only those research papers you should use for citation. You cannot use any dubious journal for citation. You cannot use a loose statement given in someone else's paper as citation. So you have to always identify that research paper is credible, valid, in good scientific journal, and it has provided proof of that. Only those aspects should be used in your writing, and you should use citation for that. Okay.
Right, sir.
Yeah. All right. If we are taking a novel topic, for research? And if not many studies are available, will it affect our paper if we are unable to give citations? Yes, that's another important question, that what do I do if my work is novel? Okay, now, first of all, what it means is that probably we are not increasing the scope of our search. There is no novel topic in the world which doesn't have some research, some support available. In which case, you can go on doing exploratory research. Okay, so the type of research is different in that case. But I often hear many doctor student particularly say that there are not many research papers because my topic is innovative, new. Yes. Why there are not many research papers? Because you are looking at a very narrow point, and hence there are no research papers. What you have to do is probably broaden the scope. So whenever I'm looking at, for example, there is no research paper, I claim, for impact of decentralization on rural poor. What I have to do is I have to then look at the literature on governance and not on decentralization alone. Then I find there is a lot of literature on governance. Then probably I have to look at the literature on power asymmetry. So when I look at the literature on power distribution in society, I'm again able to derive the implication of this research for my research. When I look at the literature on structure of society, how societies are structured, traditional societies are structured. So when I look at all this literature, I realize that decentralization as a concept can be located in this three domains of governance literature, on structure of the society, and power literature. So I have to look at the theory of power, I have to look at the theory of society, and I have to look at the theory of governance. Then I realized that no, I can use this literature and then derive or argue about my phenomenon of decentralization impact for poor from this theoretical work, from this empirical work. Okay, and you make a context specific argument, in which case your contribution is extending the existing research in other fields to this particular field. That becomes more valued. So look at it as a chance, as a potential to increase the contribution of research. Okay, you cannot say, or you cannot put up arguments without literature support. And you cannot claim there is no literature, which means if there is no literature, you start doing research for your first statement itself, whatever that you want to write. Okay. Okay, let's move ahead. Yeah. Now, literature review. So one thing that I said, literature review is not about summarizing 20, 100 research papers. Never do that. Nobody's interested, because you have to understand that who are you writing for? You're not writing for your students. You're writing for your colleagues who are well-read. So they know what paper by someone says. They themselves can read it. You don't have to summarize. You are writing literature review in support, in support of the argument for your topic. So you have to choose those papers carefully, and you only provide your arguments, and whenever which particular research fits, you put that as a citation. You don't go on summarizing, this people said this, this people said this. No, you have to argue. When, for example, when I say that decentralization and its impact on poor, I go on arguing that why decentralization should not leave poor better off, and the entire benefit should be captured by the dominant communities in village. So I have to give an argument. Okay, so what is my argument? What is my logic? So I go on narrating my logic. And in that logic, I have to provide research support, references from existing literature, because someone would have said something about that part of my explanation. So I plug that research in. Then I am saying second part of my argument, and somebody must have done something, some research in support of that logic. I have to plug that in. So it is about my arguments and plugging the support from the past literature rather than summarizing the literature. Okay, so this is slightly hard, but again, my point is never start literature review like that. You first start with identification of theory, that what is the theory that you want to use to explain this phenomenon. So I have to first focus on theory. Now let me give you example, because this is very difficult to actually appreciate and understand unless we are able to see that. So let me present now. If I am doing a research, I have done my introduction section well, I have to provide, let's say, what is my theoretical support. So for example, I'm interested in looking at the impact of employee satisfaction on organization's performance. Now this is a theoretical, right? Employee satisfaction and performance. There is literature. So I cannot say literature says this and hence I'm doing it. It's not adequate. What is the theory? Why employee satisfaction should matter for firm performance? What is the logic? That logic is embedded in one of the theory. That logic is called from a theory. So I have to identify theory. So for example, if I show you, you look at the bottom part of the figure where I present the theoretical idea. What is the theory? Now, if you look at the theory of resource-based view, RBV. Now, this is a very well-known theory in management, in strategic management particularly, right? Given by Barney and then its predecessor derives from Penrose. So what resource-based view says, that firm is a bundle of unique resources, and these resources are combined in certain fashion so as to allow you to act in certain manner. And because organizations are able to act uniquely based on their resource bundle, they derive their advantage, which others are not. And hence, because of that advantage, my competitive advantage, I get better results. Now, this is theory of research-based view. Now, I have to locate my understanding, my idea within that theory. So I have to use my conceptual framework or derive my conceptual framework from my theoretical framework. So I'm using resource-based view as a theory to derive my conceptual framework, that I've noticed that in an organization, certain type of behavior leads to employee satisfaction, and that leads to better performance of the organization. Now, if you map both theoretical plane and conceptual framework, they completely overlap. I'm not saying you have to necessarily use entire theory for your conceptual framework. You are merely interested, let us say, in small 1 or 2 relationships alone. But where does it come from? It comes from this idea of competitive advantage and organizational performance, which is a theory of resource-based view. So if you look at strategic resources, I am looking at organizational culture, for example. So that's my conceptual framework. When I say organizational culture has impact on performance, what I mean theoretically is strategic resources of organization creates better performance. Then I'm saying that my organizational culture creates behavior. In my organization, people are cooperative and highly productive. Why? Because we have a unique culture. Now, this is an empirical phenomenon. I need to find a theoretical support for theory. What is theoretical lens? That resource-based view says that a unique resource allows you to perform certain actions. Now, this is theory. And it maps, right? My organizational culture creates productivity behaviors, which keeps me satisfied as employee, and which, because I'm satisfied, I do more work and has my organization performs well. Now, resource-based view theory again says that resource allows me to act, and those actions offer me advantage, and that advantage results in performance. So unless I'm able to begin with theory, Okay, I'm not there. Nobody's interested, or at least the high quality, when we talk about high quality journals, are not interested in hypothesis, which merely says, or which does a lot of literature review. What I do normally, what I find is that people start talking about the research on job satisfaction and employee performance. They say that in IT space, people did a lot of research on satisfaction of IT workers, and that had positive impact on their performance, which is on retention as well, on less cost of employee hiring and churn, everything. These are all empirical aspects. These are all hypotheses. So if you review literature and they say that I'm also hypothesizing it, and I will collect data and do this research, it is of no value. The focus of research is on theory testing, not hypothesis testing. What is getting tested ultimately in empirical research is the theory through hypothesis. So hypotheses are implications of theory. You should be able to derive hypothesis from theory. As you see in this case, my theory says competitive edge should give me performance. Now, if I derive my hypothesis from this theory, what it means that anything that gives me competitive advantage should influence performance, right? So what gives me competitive edge in my organization? My employee satisfaction. So that's my edge, and hence it should have performance consequences. That's a hypothesis. Similarly, you can derive another hypothesis. A theory can produce million hypotheses. You can say that my organization has nice infrastructure, hence it should have good performance. This is also hypothesis derived from this theory. My organization has a nice brand value, or has nice alumni base, or my organization has good quality faculty members. My institution has nice resourceful board of directors. Now, what are these? Faculty, board of directors, alumni base, these are all resources as per theory resources. So what am I saying is not merely that board of directors standing determines performance. This is empirical part, but this empirical part is derived from my theory of resource based, which says that resources of an organization produces performance. This is generalizable. So what am I reviewing now? Am I reviewing this theory? I'm putting that theory of resource-based view says this, and hence I am expecting as a logical implication that this alumni base is also a resource of my organization, and I have strong alumni base, and hence it should produce better performance for organization. This is my hypothesis, or this is the literature which also provides support for that. And this is the trickiest part of any research. I tell you my current couple of papers that I'm working on. So one of them is new product innovation in time of crisis. So how we noticed that how certain women entrepreneurs were able to survive the crisis, and not only survive the crisis, they produce more innovations than others during pandemic lockdown. Okay, now this is an empirical phenomenon that there are how women survive the crisis. Now a journalist would go there and would talk to women and say that we did this, we did that, we had a support of family members, and we had certain relations with bank and these things, and we survived, and then we thought about this and we did things. So this journalist is reporting. But what I have to do here is that I have to call upon a theory which explains this. So what theory did I call? I called for social network theory. So social network theories explains that how network is a resource for entrepreneurs, and stronger linkages that entrepreneurs have with other stakeholders allows them access to rare resource which otherwise is not available to those entrepreneurs who are not member of these strong networks. Using this theory, now I'm hypothesizing that those women whose social network is weak were not able to access the resources and hence were not able to produce innovation. This is one hypothesis. The women which were able to use the social network, had a strong social network, got access during the pandemic, access to rare resources, and hence they were able to innovate and produce innovations. Now you see, the point is simple. It's in explanation. How do I explain it? So how do I explain it? I am explaining it what otherwise a journalist would explain. The only difference being that I am explaining it through theory. Whereas journalists would not know theory. They will report what they did, actions only. But actions have theoretical meaning. Right? So this is, I think, the trickiest part. Yes, please. Raj Shekharji, you have a question. Please go ahead.
Good morning, sir.
Yes.
The session is going very well. Thank you so much. So I always had this question about the difference between the theoretical framework and conceptual framework.
Yes.
It's pretty clear with this explanation. And now what I want to ask is, I've seen a few theses. Some of them write this conceptual framework and the theoretical framework in the introduction chapter, and some of them write it in the literature review. Yes. Which one is appropriate, sir?
Yes. So there is nothing one right or wrong. It's more about where does it fit better. Normally, for example, in the research paper on new product innovation during pandemic paper, right? We are writing the conceptual or theoretical framework at least in the introduction section itself.
Okay.
And then we write conceptual framework in the literature review.
Okay.
But in other paper that I'm going to show a little later, we write both theoretical and conceptual framework in the section that follows the introduction section.
Okay.
Right. So there is nothing right or wrong. Introduction, you have understood that the objective of introduction is to explain the need for the study. And identify contribution of the study. So what? When someone says that, so what you are doing this study? So this is why I'm doing this study. This is what I am answering in this study.
Okay.
Okay. And if you think that in answering this question, I need help of a theory, let it be there. Or if you don't think the need for a theory there, you move it to the next following section. Normally, I would say that avoid. Normally, again, there is no one definitive rule, but normally I would say that keep theoretical discussion and conceptual framework for your second section of the paper.
Okay, all right.
And you don't have to necessarily write a theoretical framework in this way. Okay, you can have it in paragraph form, in the discussion form, which leads to derivation of a conceptual framework which is presented in graphical form.
Okay, yeah, because there are multiple constructs and there are various theories for each construct. Absolutely. So there'll be a list of it. So paragraph form, I think, suits better.
Yes, would suit in certain places as well. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome. Okay, so now on the basis of that, now I do the literature review. Now my literature review is specific to my conceptual framework or conceptual model. Whatever that I want to establish. So what I do is that I organize existing literature. I organize existing literature around my framework or in certain framework that allows me the grasp of the entire literature. So for example, in the example of decentralization's impact on poor, what I am going to do is that I will explain that the total literature in the field can be categorized in this 2x2 matrix, where there are people who have done research on decentralization at micro level, and they focus on the structure. Whereas there are researchers who have looked at the decentralization literature from micro level, and they have focused on actors, not the structure. And similarly, there are researchers who have looked at the macro aspect of decentralization and focused on structure, and look at the macro level and look at the actors. So I'm going to categorize this, all the existing literature, into this 4 box. And then I would say that my research is focused largely on, let's say, the actors and at micro level. So I'm also locating where does my research falls in. Other way, okay, this is not only way. Other way, for example, I'm quoting again from one of my research papers, which is in progress. I'm organizing the literature around my idea. And what is my idea? So there is another research paper that I'm working on, where I'm looking at impact of dual strategic orientations of organization and its impact on firms' longevity. Okay, that means how long a firm would survive. What is going to be the survival chances of the firm based on the strategic orientation? Now I have to make a justification that my research is unique, new, and what is it that I contribute. So what I am doing is that I have identified through search, Scopus search, all the studies in this area with certain keywords, and I am giving the list of the studies here. And I'm saying that whether they look at the dual strategic orientation as complementary or competitive, or these are the 2 ways in which you can look at it. So I'm listing that they see competitive, sequential, complementary, okay? And then how did they measure it? And then is there a cost of strategic orientation that they have discussed about in the literature, and whether they look at the survival? Now, what are my interests here? My interest is to show that I am the first one in this area where I am suggesting that I'm looking at long-term implications of dual strategic orientation. And I am, unlike the existing research, I'm measuring it, I'm capturing this through context analysis, through content analysis of the published text in annual reports. And I am the only one who is looking at the cost aspect, that whether it is costly and it affects shareholders' return. If something is costly, it's good for the organizer, but it also reduces the profit. So I'm looking at what does it cost for a company to develop the dual strategic orientation, and whether it has impact on firm survival in the long run. So that's also yes. So I'm now using this kind of a table structure to hold the literature together, to do a literature review. In which case, I don't have to go on saying what Greenlee said, what Debussy said, what Conduit said, what Park said, and what Zebal said. I'm using it to make an argumentation about my point. So literature review is not what others said. Literature review is about what I want to argue, and I want to use other person's literature to support my argumentation. So it's about me, not about others. So this is a fundamental difference, okay, between literature review. It's not about what others said, it's about what I want to say and who agrees with me and who disagrees with me. Okay, yeah. Hitesh Kumar have a question. Yes, please.
So am I audible?
Yes, please.
So just previously we were discussing on theory to the hypothesis to the coming to the based on sample, we are coming to the conclusion for the population.
Yes.
But just only for the sake of for getting more idea.
Yes,
don't you think sometimes it is better to go with because this is a deductive approach in what in economics we say. Don't you think maybe inductive may be more better, because sometimes maybe phenomena we capture through some specific theory may be not appropriate, maybe like what you are also doing in your part, which do have some additional dynamic also. So I don't know how to, then it's not you yourself is theorizing something.
Yes.
Don't you think it's going on in that angle?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. This is technically called hypothetico-deductive approach of doing research, right? So it belongs to one school of research, one type of research. And as I said in the beginning, that this is not the only way to do research. This is the conventional known way of doing research. And as you rightly said, there is the interpretivist approach as well, right? So what is interpretivist approach? That is said that I will look at the case and I would inductively derive a theory from it. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And that would call for a different kind of researcher's training. Okay, so that is valid approach. That's absolutely correct approach and nothing wrong with it. Only difference being that when you use that approach, you focus more on theory building. You focus more on generating facts, generating exploratory idea, or generating hypothesis, new hypothesis, interesting hypothesis. If that's the objective of the research, which is a very, very valid objective of the research, you should do that. And normally research process, if you look at the larger societal research process, it goes from inductive to deductive, deductive to inductive, inductive to deductive. And how I give you example, we all know about Charles Darwin, right? So when he went on a cruise in HM Beagle, he noticed, he visited several islands, and he noticed that in this islands, different islands, the species had a certain pattern or behavior of certain changes. He noticed some continued certain pattern of changes across the island. And from that, he thought that probably this is a sign of evolution. That means the environmental pressures create the structure of species, and those pressures continuously shape the design of animals, of species. And that's how he inductively gave the theory of evolution. Now, what is happening currently in biology, if you look at the zoology, biology, much of the work, research work, continues to derive hypotheses from this theory of evolution. Now, the theory is inductively derived, right? From cases, if the theory is derived. Now, today, several researchers say that if this theory of evolution is correct, we must have a species with this characteristics, which is extinct now. And then they go with this hypothesis derived, they go to the field, dig out certain specimen, and then say, yes, we have found support for hypothesis. Hence, my theory is correct. Okay, so this is deductive process, that was inductive process. Right. So both are same. Okay, there is another question. How to find your theory if you are combining two different aspects and bringing it together to test causal effect on other? It's always necessary to have a theory. Yes, it's possible that you can combine two different theories. In fact, in this research, we are using two theories. Okay, for example, this pandemic this thing. So we are using social network and broaden and build theory, BBT theory. So because social network provides resources is one aspect, and these resources are mostly physical resources or material resources that you derive through this thing. But surviving pandemic and producing innovation also requires psychological resources. Right now, psychological resources are explained better through BBT theory. So what we are doing is we are fusing, combining social network theory with BBT theory to derive hypothesis and explain the phenomenon. So yes, it is possible that you can use more than one theory, provided you are able to connect both the theories well. Okay, and is it always necessary to have a theory? Second part. In this research, hypothetical, deductive, positivist research, yes. In other research, for example, there is a research, interpretive research methodology called grounded theory research. Okay, in which case you don't begin with a theory at all. You begin with the facts, and then you try to derive a theory from that, from your research, from the data. So deriving theory from data. So that is also possible, but that calls for a different model of doing research altogether. That is something we have to understand. So you can't have what do you call selective pieces of both things. You want to use case studies, you want to use interpretive thing, and then you want to run hypothesis test. That is not possible. Okay, you can't fix the tail at the mouth of the elephant. So you have to follow the canons of research in a particular field. You must know where do you belong. Okay, and only that is important for a researcher. So yes, it is necessary. It is not necessary if you're doing a different type of research. Okay. All right, I have explained citation, referencing, and finally hypothesis before I go into showing the examples. Now, how do you write hypothesis? Okay, so writing hypothesis is not about saying X is related to Y. The focus should be on explaining why X should be related to Y. You can't go on just providing literature support saying that this study found X related to Y. And hence, I am also saying X related to Y. It is more about why, aspect of why, that is critical. So if you can't explain aspect of why, it's not important. Okay. So now let us look at two examples from my published research. And I will first explain about this research on innovation orientation, strategic R&D, and firms' resilience to macroeconomic shocks. Okay, so this research, let me present. I'm stopping the share and I will share another file. Can you enable screen sharing? I'm not able to.
Yes, sir. Just a second. We're on to it.
Yes. So